If you are not getting Singapore PR, then is Australia worth considering? And in this presentation, we will also compare it with Canada. So we already have another presentation where we do comparison between Canada and Singapore. So this is an extension of same presentation, but here we are considering Australia. So before we start, I just want to give some more background to this video. So this video is for somebody who is working in Singapore on an employment pass or some kind of work visa and is thinking of applying PR in Singapore or alternatively migrating to Australia. So what happens is sometimes people don't get PR in Singapore. I mean, their PR application may get rejected, and sometimes it is getting rejected many times. And at that point of time, they start thinking whether they should really think of going to Australia, because getting a PR to Australia is relatively easy as compared to Singapore. And then obviously they can settle over there. Now, if you are watching this video from out of Singapore and if you don't have EP and S pass, then this video is not really relevant for you. Because if you are not working in Singapore, you are not entitled to apply for Singapore PR anyway. So let's move ahead. And the first point that I want to highlight here is why people think of Australia. So Australia runs a very large migration program. If you check Australia on the map of the world, it's a very large country. It can be almost as big as United States of America or maybe roughly slightly small. But the population is only 20 million of that entire country, and most of the population is on the coastal side. So as a result, they are always in need of people, and they run a structured migration program where they typically take around 160,000 people per year as migrant. And skilled migrant and students is one of the largest pool in this. They have an easy point based system. So if you satisfy that point requirement, then you are qualified to apply for PR, and you will obviously get it unless there are some serious problems about your authenticity of your documents. The approvals typically take 18 to 24 months. So this is slightly longer compared to Canada. Now, one of the things is that Australia is near to Asia. So many Asians think of Australia first rather than Canada. And I also feel that between Canada and Australia, Australia scores better as immigration choice. So now let's go through the points and compare Australia and Singapore, and where relevant, we will also pull in the details for Canada. So when it comes to per capita income, in 2020, Singapore per capita income was 60,000 US dollars. Whereas for Canada it was 43,000 and for Australia it was 52,800. That means Australia is better than Canada in terms of per capita income, but it is not yet on par with Singapore. So as an average person, you are likely to earn less in Canada compared to Singapore. Low personal taxes for Singapore. So here I will put tax calculation, rough tax calculation for Australia, Canada and Singapore. Suppose your income is $200,000 in all these countries, then the respective taxes will be 60,500 in Australia, 84,000 in Canada and 21,150 in Singapore. There will be some Medicare levy also in Australia which I have not included because I don't know the rates. So the post-tax income in Australia will be 139,000, Canada it will be 116,000 and Singapore will be 178,000. So obviously Singapore scores here well. Australia is better than Canada, but both these countries post-tax income will be low. One important point to keep it in mind, here we have presumed income to be same in dollar terms, but the average income, per capita income is different, we have seen in the last slide. So if you are getting income of 200,000 in Singapore, you are likely to get an income of around 170 or 180,000 in Australia when you adjust it for average per capita income. So as such, your post-tax income in Australia as well as Canada is likely to be significantly lower than that in Singapore. Moving on to the next slide then, it is not easy to get job. It is very slow. The economies and the processes there are quite slow, and especially in non-IT field you will face problems. So what happens is that in these countries and in Australia also, the typical ordinary jobs like cashiers, retailers, drivers, bricklayers, all these jobs are many. And there is a good demand for that also. Meaning, as a cashier in Singapore, you might be earning $3,000, 3,000 Singapore dollars. But in Australia, as a cashier, you might be getting 5,500 Australian dollars. So the salaries are good. But many Asians are not ready to do this kind of jobs. They want their own director, managerial, or some kind of service jobs. Another problem is that Australian experience is always needed. So even if you have been experienced in your home country, that experience will not be valued much in Australia. They will always look for experience in Australia, and many a times they also look for some personal references which they can verify. As a result, getting a job becomes quite difficult. My friend has to wait 3 to 4 months for a job in IT field in Sydney, and he was a quite a high level of IT director. So as such, if you think that you are going to land and you will get a job next day, it's not going to happen. You may have to compromise on the salary for the first job, and if you compromise on the salary in the first job, then your subsequent job salary will depend upon your previous salary. So, it's a kind of a chain which you need to understand and play well. The next point is weather. Now, when it comes to weather, Canada weather we have seen is very harsh. In winters, it can go to minus 30 degrees, and winters can last 6 to 7 months. Singapore weather is also not great, but it is not very harsh. Singapore only has summer and rain. No winter, no cold weather. Australia definitely wins here because Australia weather is best. In cities like Melbourne, it might be slightly harsh for a week or so in the height of winter, but otherwise, most of the Australia experiences a beautiful weather all year around. Next point is about languages, and languages is not a problem in Australia because everywhere English is spoken and it is an official language. Canada, some provinces are French, and therefore there can be language problems. So again, Australia and Singapore here are scoring at same level. The cost of living in Australia can be high. Last few years, Australia is experiencing property boom, and at least in major cities, the property prices have gone above $1 million. In addition to that, you need to keep at least two cars if you are having a family. So obviously, the cost of petrol, maintenance, you have to bear. On top of that, taxes are high, you have to pay Medicare levy, and there are other insurance expenses. Moreover, this country is also very vast. So the logistic cost of moving goods from one place to other is also factored into the prices. So in general, you will find that the goods those are available in supermarket are costlier compared to Singapore. Australia has a hybrid healthcare. They also call it Medicare, but it is a better system compared to Canada. So in this system, public medical or public Medicare is available at a lower cost. So this is a government sponsored. I think you have to pay something like $20 for anything, and that's it. But you also have options for private. So you can also go to private medical, and for that you can take your own insurance. Because of this, the systems are really less stress. So public medical is not as stress as in Canada, and that is a good thing. So this system I will say is quite similar to what Singapore has, where there is a government medical and also there is an option for private hospitals. The next point is you need to drive everywhere. So even if you have to get a milk, you will need to go out, and go out means you will have to drive because nearest shopping complexes, malls or convenience stores might be 5 kilometers away from you. and that means you have to drive. And that becomes quite painful after some time. You cannot easily walk. Singapore is not like that. In Singapore, if you just get out of your HDB block or condominium, there will be a lot of shops around. And just by taking a simple walk, you can go to the shop, buy whatever you want, and come back. Now, because of COVID, many places there is a practice of delivering directly at home. And that obviously takes out some pain of this walking and driving. But still, driving is essential because you may need to drop your kids to the school or enrichment classes. You may need to fetch them back. So, obviously, you have to drive. There are no buses, or there are no employees, or there are no maids or anything you can keep who can do all this for you. Next point is about a distance. So, this is a map of Asia, and the red dot that we see is where Singapore is. And the circle that you see is 5 hours flight distance from Singapore. So most of the Asia is within 5 hours of flight time, and therefore most of the places in Asia there is a direct flight available, and the air tickets are also quite cheap. Now Australia is not very badly placed. I mean, it is slightly off. So if you have to go to Australia, let's say from India, then you will have to first come to Singapore, Malaysia, or Thailand, and then take a connecting flight to your preferred city in Australia. That obviously adds another 8 hours of flight time, but it is still not comparable to Canada. Canada, you are guaranteed to lose 2 days in flight. That's not the situation here. The next point is about public transport. In Australia, in major cities, there is some amount of public transport available. For example, in Melbourne, you have a very good tram system. In Sydney, trains are quite common. So many people travel by train every day for job. In Brisbane, there is this what they call ferry system. So Brisbane has got a big river, and that river has been used for putting the boats, and people go by those boats. So generally in major cities, there is some kind of public transport available, but it is limited. It is not as extensive as in Singapore. And secondly, out of main cities, you obviously don't have any public transport. So if you're staying, say, 3 hours away from maybe Brisbane, then you will need to have your own car. Taxis are obviously costly, and that is a story in both Australia and in Canada. But in Singapore, that's not a situation. You don't need to have a car. Singapore has got an excellent infrastructure of public transport, and that is possible more because of the density of population. So you have MRT and you have buses. And taxis are also quite cheap, in the sense if you engage Grab for a typical distance, you will end up paying $15 to $20 maximum. The next point is loneliness and depression. So what happens? Australia is a large country and there are empty places everywhere. You also have a specific type of staying, in the sense you stay in independent houses which can be quite apart. So a feeling of loneliness happens in the mind of people, especially in Asians, they experience. And that can result into depressive tendencies. But that problem is not there for Singapore, because it is a small city country and population density is 7,000 per square kilometer. So you generally feel that you are in a home country, especially if you are an Asian migrant. But in general, I will say that the problem of loneliness is much less pronounced in Australia compared to Canada. Because Canada, not only it is a very vast country, winters are harsh and also the days are small. In the sense, in winter, sun will set at 4 o'clock and will rise at 9 o'clock, and that's quite painful for many people. Regarding the food options, Singapore has got food courts where you can get any type of meal. Various options are available, and in case you want to have some better options, you can always go for high-end dining. In Australia, it is not so easy. So there are food courts, to be frank, in some places. Variety is limited, and obviously if you go to dine in restaurant, then the cost will be high. The primary reason of this difference is because of the density of population. In Singapore, in any local market or any central business district area, you will find there are a lot of people who want to eat food, and therefore these kind of facilities are easier to maintain. Coming to education, Singapore universities appear in top 13 in worldwide ranking. These two universities are NTU and NUS. Moreover, local education is very good. Local examinations are very good, and many students, many bright students go for further education to US and UK. Now, Asians typically focus more on these aspects and they want to have better education for their kids. In comparison to this, none of the Australian university ranks in the top 20 worldwide list. The next point is about cultural differences. As you know, Australia has a Western culture, which is quite distinct compared to Asia. And that is sometimes difficult for people to adjust, especially when they think of kids. When they think that kids will grow up and at 18 they will leave the house, start living independently, and will start taking decisions of their life independently, many Asians find it difficult to digest. Because normally in Asia, the practice is that kids will stay at your home. It is only when they get married they will move out of the house. So for Asians, it can be difficult. And the last point I want to highlight is the domestic help, which is maid. In Singapore, you can bring a maid in Singapore on a visa, official visa. The salary of maid is roughly $500 to $600. On top of that, you pay $260 levy and some other costs for maid's expenses. So the total cost generally ranges around 1000 Singapore dollars, and for 1000 Singapore dollars, you get a person to work all day at your home, to clean the house, to cook the food, to take care of elderly, and to take care of children. This is one of the best arrangements you can have. The maid will stay in your home and will have generally a dedicated small maid room, and that's the arrangement. You don't get these kind of facilities in Australia because you cannot take, you can employ a maid, but that maid will cost you possibly $5,000. So you are not anyway going to afford it. In Australia, all the work of cleaning, cooking, washing of your clothes, taking care of elderly if it is there, if anybody is there, taking care of children, everything you have to do, and that you have to do it after your day job is over. So in summary, it is not easy for Asians to settle in Australia. If you are in Singapore and thinking of migrating there because your PR is not getting approved, you need to think carefully, and maybe you may need to give few more tries for your Singapore PR. However, compared to Canada, definitely Australia is a better option.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel today. PR Application is a leading immigration consultancy company in Singapore.